Welcome to the fourth session of the seminar series Forms, Fragments, and Fractures in Contemporary Women's Life Writing, Spain, Portugal, and Italy, hosted by the Center for Contemporary Women's Writing at the School of Advanced Study, University of London, and organized by Hani Lolur and myself. Today's session focuses on linguistic and cultural minorization. When Hani and I were preparing the program, we agreed that this was a particularly important issue, especially in Spain, where Catalan, Galician, Basque, and Asturian literatures have undergone significant processes of legitimization throughout the 20th century. As many of you know, I'm Asturian myself, and Asturian is my mother tongue. I frequently say that Asturian is my mother tongue, Spanish is my native language. The tension between the familiar and the intimate and the social that is, I think, internalized in most bilingual speakers, and that is a crucial aspect when considering life writing. In recent years, we have witnessed an urgent need to consider the complexity of the different literary system in the peninsula, the polis system, according to the notion coined by Itamar Ben Soar in the 70s, to refer to the intricate structure of the literary field and the tensions between the so-called center and periphery, majorities and minorities, and so on. And from this perspective, and in connection with our seminar series, today's papers aim to explore the complexities of concepts such as minor literatures and minoritarian literatures in relation to gender and life writing. Unfortunately, again, this aspect has not received as much attention as it deserves, and could in itself be a subject of an entire series. Our speakers today will address these issues, including the relationship between biography and autobiography, in the case of Rosalía de Castro, as well as broader topics such as the intersection of sexual minority identity and multilingualism in literary production, as seen in the work of Itziar Ziga, or diary keeping, as we have been discussing in the previous sessions. We look forward to hearing the presentations and engaging in discussions afterwards. I encourage everybody to ask questions, either video or in the chat. Please also note that the seminar is being recorded. And now I'll hand it over to Hani to introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Raquel, for that excellent introduction. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. We're really delighted to welcome our three speakers today. I'm very grateful to them for taking the time to come and speak in our series. All three speakers really need little introduction. They're doing pioneering work in the field, and it's very much our pleasure to be able to welcome them here today. Our first speaker is María Àngels Francés-Díez from the University of Alicante. María Àngels holds a degree and PhD in Catalan philology and a degree in English philology. She was Vice Dean of Culture, Promotion, Research and Library of the Faculty of Philosophy and Arts at the University of Alicante and Director of the Department of Catalan Philology, also at the University of Alicante, where she currently works as lecturer, and she teaches contemporary Catalan literature, children's and young adult literature, and didactics of literature, among other topics. Her research focuses on autobiographical literature and gender criticism and the role of social networks in the dissemination of literary works and the construction of the non-academic canon. She's been involved in several research projects on autobiographical literature, so including autobiographical forms in contemporary Catalan literature, diaries and the canon, knowledge of the other, biographies and portraits in 20th century Catalan literature, and has a very exciting new project in the works too. And she has contributed to numerous books, including the volume Aproximarse a la otra, Biografíos, Semblanços y Retrats, So her research on literature from a gender perspective has resulted in a thesis on the subject and numerous publications, including the 2 monographs, Feminismo e Literatura, L'ora violeta de Montserrat Roig, and Montserrat Roig, Feminismo, Testimonios y, Memoria. And the latter of those books was awarded the Prize for Linguistic and Literary Studies as part of the 12th Critics Awards of the Inter-University Institute of Valencian Philology. We would like in particular to congratulate María Àngels on the fantastic news that she has secured the position of University Chair very recently, an incredibly well-deserved honour. And her paper today is entitled Women's Life Writing as a Reflective Surface, the Case of 4 20th Century Catalan Women Writers. Over to you, María Àngels.
Thank you very much. Indeed, first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Raquel Fernández and Hani Lolor for the opportunity to participate in this lecture series on biography, which has provided a meeting space for numerous writers and perspectives on life writing, yielding highly stimulating results. So I will now begin my presentation about Catalan diaries, Catalan women diaries. Okay. Let's see if I manage to share my screen. Yes. Please tell me, can you see it?
Yes.
Is everything all right?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, let's start taking position, the autobiography and her text. The woman who takes up the pen to describe her own experience is acutely aware of the expectation generated by her text. The deception of memory and the pressure surrounding how to narrate a life account from a female perspective are evident in the case of the American poet, novelist, and memoirist May Sarton, who in 1968 wrote an autobiography entitled Plant Dreaming Deep. Despite the beauty of the narrative, which recounts the acquisition of a personal space and the writer's life in solitude, Sarton herself acknowledges a striking absence. In the book, there was no trace of the race, the passionate struggle, or the despair of her life. The reason for this omission was her attempt to conform to a pre-established model. And Hayborn says she had written the book following the old model of women's autobiography, which tends to find beauty even in pain and to transform anger into spiritual acceptance. To rectify this tendency to conceal the meaning of pain and struggle that characterizes Plant Dreaming Deep, Sarton published Journal of a Solitude 5 years later, a diary covering the same period as the previous autobiography, but which narrates the daily pain and struggle of the writer to dedicate herself to artistic creation without losing contact with the world and reality. It is significant, therefore, that anxiety and despair appear in the second work, the diary, more connected to everyday intimacy than the first version. Sarton deliberately sets out to articulate her rage, raising her voice to approach the exercise of authority. And I read, and more than anything else, what had been forbidden to women was anger and the frank admission of the desire to have power and control over their own lives. The presence or absence of stridency in women's autobiographical text tilts the balance of criticism against or in favor of the work in question, substitute strident with feminist, and the result will be more or less the same. Denying women the right to angry protest, to public complaint, is equivalent to denying them access to power, which has traditionally been in the hands of men. This also means depriving them of the opportunity to assert a story distinct from others. And I read, A woman's identity, the right to have her own story, depends on her capacity to act in the public domain, because power is power is having the ability to occupy a place in any type of discourse that is essential for action, and having the right for the role one place to count for something. In the Catalan literary sphere, the diaries of Olga Xirinacs exemplify a claim to personal significance within an environment she often perceives as hostile. In 2004, she published El Viaje Dietari, which means the journey diary, in 1986-1990. Which contains repeated references to awards granted to her literary works and to favorable reviews they have received in an attempt to justify her place in the contemporary Catalan literary scene. From her perspective, however, her efforts had not been justly rewarded. And I quote, María Frey warned me of a certain initial apprehension. I am a woman without a generational group. I have won the Jobs Florals. It seems that these are two negative points added to the recent awards. And as they tell me this, I am left perplexed. Am I then condemned? Why? By whom? They. The judges in the shadows. No, comment, choose, exclude. This indifference from critics, a mysterious they, presumably male, toward her work, is also evident in her absence from the list of the most highly regarded diarists, according to a survey conducted by the Contemporary Literary Research Group, which I belong to, at the University of Alicante. The sense of marginalization permeates the entire diary. I read disappointment because A.B. excludes me from his publication of the novel up to 1986 in 3 and 4, which is an edit and publishing house. I told him everything I felt, at length, painfully experienced on other occasions when I had been ignored in the literary world. You must have made a great effort to exclude me, I lamented. Why? Vanity, bounded pride? No. Resistance to disappearing due to a cruel silence that I do not understand. Later, I must live again, slowly, without explaining the rejection to myself. Xirinacs' vehement protest against critical neglect of her work, combined with the narration of personal experiences, often painful, such as the illness from which she recovers in hospital, situates this diary within a new textual model. In this model, the autobiographer neither conceals her indignation at perceived invisibility, nor sublimates pain as an experience meant to strengthen her or want to be accepted with resignation. Just as Olga Xirinacs raises her voice to assert her authority, so too does María Aurelia Capmany in her diaries Pedra de Toc, which means something like touchstone, volumes 1 and 2, and in her memoirs Mala Memoria, Bad Memory, and Això era y no era, which literally means this was and was not, but is something like once upon a time. Her presence in the public sphere, where she assumes political responsibilities, lends her autobiographical works a polemical tone absent from other Catalan autobiographical texts, such as Confessions y Quaderns Íntims, Confessions and Intimate Notebooks by Rosa Leveroni, which we will discuss later. Both volumes of Pedra de Toc cover the same period, just as in Sarton's case, from the Francoist occupation of Barcelona to the early 60s. These are complementary texts, colleges that mix references to contemporary journalistic events with the author's personal recollections. However, there is a certain tonal difference. According to her editor, Guillem Jordi Graells, I read the first volume of the series is more bitter and focused on Francoism in general, whereas the second is more ironic and concentrates on Catalan Francoism. It is likely that the greater virulence of some aspects of the second volume stems from the reactions provoked by the first. Some voices protested against Capmann's recounting of those old stories when what was needed was forgetting, reconciliation, and thinking about the future. Her response to this attitude was forceful. If you do not want one serving, you shall have two. And the second, even more mortifying, in recalling the writings and attitudes of national figures. As we can see, it is precisely the stridency of Capmann's protest that unsettles the intellectual class of the time. She does not merely assert her own importance within the literary scene, she places herself fully within the public sphere and attacks the entire political class of the period. If this boldness already distances Capmann from traditional female autobiographical models, another factor further reinforces this distinction: her unwavering determination to become a writer by her own will and not as a mere accident of fate, even if this entails painful sacrifices. In Això era i no era, she narrates the evolution of her life and writing from one oriented towards others to one of self-affirmation. The opinions of others, those of my beloved mathematics professor, were more important than that dark, frustrated desire to communicate my secrets to the whole world. The whole world did not matter to me. I played that trick that women have played for centuries. We renounce prestige, freedom, and the pleasure of intelligence in exchange for love. One day, I decided I had had enough. It must not have been easy for me. I remember a sleepless night, which is rare for me. I probably intuited that I was not only renouncing my beloved profession, but that I was also, with reluctance, giving up a place in our world. I was choosing solitude. There you have it. For Capmann, the pursuit of literary career entails an even more intimate renunciation. And I read, "Suddenly I thought, you will never have a child. You will never be a proper woman. No matter what happens, you will do what you want to do." And I began to weep uncontrollably. María Aurelia Capmann represents the archetype of a strong woman who does not conceal the conflicts caused by her research for her vocation. In making this decision, she voluntarily and painfully gives up a part of herself. In a way, the part that most defines her as a woman, the one connected to her body. Throughout her life, she will embrace Simone de Beauvoir's maxim that her books will become her children. Both Olga Chirinacs and María Aurelia Capmann strive for self-affirmation within the literary and intellectual context of their time. Through their private writings, they seek to establish a new approach to autobiographical writing that liberates them from traditional ideology and the essential in self that has shaped it. By speaking from their marginalized position, they resist participating in the dominant cultural fictions, including those of man and woman. However, it is significant that Chirinacs does not appear among the best regarded diaries, and that of Capmann's works, only Dietari de Prudencia is ranked 25th. Only one woman writer, Rosa Leveroni, holds a higher position, the 14th. Carme Riera, who recounts her pregnancy experience in Temps d'una espera, which means waiting time, ranks among the lowest, 34th out of 46. Confessions i quaderns íntims, Confessions and Intimate Notebooks by Rosalía Leveroni is a posthumous collection of private writings on the theme of love, constituting remarkable documents within the Catalan autobiographical tradition. The title itself is eloquent in relation to the outward orientation of this intimate diary. The term confession necessarily implies the presence of another, a listener, a confidant. And this confidant, whose name is silence, following the ancient rules of troubadour hermeticism, is neither absent nor passive. The recipient of these intimate confessions is none other than Ferran Soldevila, a poet, playwright, historian, and fiction Catalan writer, who is not only the desired and distant lover, but also serves as the literary supervisor and critic of the aspiring writer. Leveroni's private papers, in fact, include Soldevila's stylistic comments and annotation on the prose sent to him by his enamored correspondent, transforming what would otherwise be a monologue into a genuine dialogue. Leveroni's autobiographical text employs a play of mass that illustrates the dual voice with which the writer engages with the autobiographical form. Known primarily as a poet, in her obsessive love for Soldevila, she adopts a subordinate role closely aligned with traditional gender expectation. She says, "I have never felt the urge, humility, pride, to be immortal or to occupy a line in literary textbooks. If I have written and still write verses, it is out of pure inner necessity, but always to make myself known to another. Once that it is achieved, an immediate, urgent, and profoundly sweet need, why should immortality concern me?" Modesty, self-effacement, passivity. 3 characteristics conventionally celebrated in the female disposition. Yet her conformity to this role extends even further. As Soldevila himself explains in a letter addressed to her, the author's subtle masochism approaches the sublimation of suffering and pain characteristic of the religious diaries. He says, "You are a pessimist by nature. More, you take pleasure in suffering. More, with an angelic diabolical alchemy, you transform joy into pain." Among Leveroni's private papers, some also document her relationship with Carles Riba, who was an important Catalan poet, narrator, literary critic, translator, and academic. As Soldevila, he also acts as mentor and patron to the aspiring writer. The intellectual's interest soon develops into an affection far subtle. Although the Leveroni-Riba correspondence does not explicitly reveal the nuances of the affair, her letters allude to them. Here we discern the writer's dual voice. In her letters to Soldevila and in published correspondence, she maintains a restrained tone, whereas in published private texts, she radically shifts register, expressing sharp criticism of Riba, as Moino and Pujol explain. It is, at the very least, striking to reconcile this discordant attitude, acerbic in some texts, tender and passionate in others. This is not the only instance of Leveroni's dual voice. Whereas earlier we observed her modest disinterest in achieving literary immortality, she simultaneously exhibits a profound concern for the quality of her autobiographical text. Indeed, she actively seeks and provokes Soldevila's literary supervision. And I read, "I dreamed last night that you were reading these pages and adding your comments. It would be interesting if you did so, but I know you will not." This subtle provocation has its desired effect. Soldevila critically revises Leveroni's prose, suspecting that her extreme modesty is more of a mask than a genuine concern. And I quote, "If only it could serve to create literature. But all this is terribly bad, I am certain of it. And moreover, it is rather laughable." He, "Do not believe it, if indeed you do. These pages contain very good things." Carmen Riera presents a distinct case as she bases her work Temps d'una espera, Waiting Time, from 1998, on the maternal experience as an intrinsically feminine domain traditionally associated with the domestic sphere. This work, originally private, enters the public domain through publication. It thus represents a rare convergence of acquiescence to a role conventionally assigned to women and the assertion of the right to narrate it oneself, thereby resisting external definition of this experience, which are abundant in literature. The writer herself articulates her intention to give voice where silence has prevailed. She says, "Why have women not written pregnancy diaries? Perhaps because this extraordinary event has been regarded as the most ordinary aspect of female life, given that our sole purpose was reproduction. It is possible that from now on, waiting diaries will proliferate, for as we approach the 21st century, women have gained the ability to observe ourselves as objects while simultaneously being subjects. We are no longer anonymous. We have achieved an identity." The diary is depicted as the ideal space in which to narrate the experience of pregnancy free from pre-established models. Diary, a space of freedom, without constraints, without limits, without obstacles, without style, without censorship. However, anxiety about self-representation, about being read by another, remains persistently present, and yet, in the mirror of nothingness, of absence, of the blank page, we also desperately seek a gratifying image. We unwittingly self-censor. We search for the most flattering angle, absurd. It is in the tension between the need to explain one's own physical transformation and the desire to establish emotional and intimate connection with the growing child that the diary succeeds in presenting a new version of the autobiographical genre, one that only a feminine perspective can narrate from within, from the body. Like Leveroni's work, Riera is an exceptional case within the Catalan literary landscape. The continuous attention to an interpretation of the maternal body, as well as the amorous relationship with the internal other, align her work with the concerns of different feminism. So to conclude, as a space for self-construction, diaries serve as a reflective surface for women, embodying both senses of the term. They provide a site where one's image is mirrored, both the outward persona that the external world interprets, often shrouded behind a mask, yielding hypotheses rather than certainties, and the inward self, often harboring inner demons that are difficult to articulate or verbalize. The tension between these two dimensions encapsulates the fundamental contradiction faced by contemporary Catalan writers. This polarity between the self and the world illuminates not only the writer's private trajectories, but also the context in which she is embedded. Introspection entails an analysis of her time, her self in the world. Here you have the reference, the works cited, and that's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Àngels, for that fascinating paper. I thought you really beautifully elaborated that polarity between self and world, the dynamics between I, us, and them, and raised some really important questions that are, in fact, so intimately connected to some of the other papers on diaries that we have. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. For now, we'll move directly on to our second speaker. And just a note, before I introduce Iker, he unfortunately has to go directly after his paper because of the different time zones. We're really grateful to him for managing to fit this in right in the middle of his working day in Nebraska. But I'm sure he would be happy for you to email him potentially with questions, Iker. So just to introduce Iker briefly, again, someone who really needs no introduction. Iker González-Allende is Leyland J. and Dorothy H. Olson Professor of Modern Languages and Literatures and full Professor of Hispanic Studies at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He specializes in gender and queer studies, the Spanish Civil War, exile and migration, Basque studies, and autobiographical writing. He has published 8 fantastic books, including the monographs Hombres en Movimiento, Masculinidades Españolas en los Exilios y Emigraciones del 1939 al 1999, and Líneas de Fuego, Género y Nación en la Narrativa Española durante la Guerra Civil, as well as the edited volume Masculinidades, Gays y Maricas en la Cultura Española Contemporánea, and the editions of Pilar de Zubilla's works. He has also published more than 60 articles in books and academic journals. So a very warm welcome and thank you, Iker. Today, over to you.
Thank you so much, Hania. Thank you also, Raquel, for inviting me to be here today. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. And today I'm gonna talk about the latest book by Itziar Ziga, who is a Basque author. And the title of my presentation is Men's Violence, Heteropatriarchal Vampirism, and Feminist Community in the Memoirs of Itziar Ziga. So the higher visibility and social rejection of men's violence against women does not prevent feminicides in Spain from continuing to happen regularly in the last decade, with around 50 women being murdered each year. According to the data of the Ministry of Equality of the Spanish government, 58 women were killed by their husbands, boyfriends, or exes in 2023, while 49 died in 2021 and 2022. However, Raquel Osborne warns about the official numbers of victims of men's violence being usually lower than those from NGOs and feminist groups. And we should also consider the increasing murders of children by their fathers, the so-called vicarious violence, which aims at hurting women through their loved ones, mostly their children. And right now in Spain, we have all this controversy about the publication of the novel about José Bretón, who killed his children a few years ago. So in addition to murders, physical and psychological abuse against women is another more extended manifestation of men's violence, but more difficult to measure and prevent because it is only officially documented through complaints in courts. According to the latest annual report of the Spanish Observatory of Violence Against Women, in 2022, there were over 182,000 criminal complaints about gender violence. However, many women do not dare to report their abusers for numerous reasons, such as fear of revenge, social stigma, the little effectiveness and protection of the justice system, and the uncertainty about their personal, economic, and family future. This explains why in the 1980s and 1990s, when there was little social awareness about men's violence, Maribel Ziga, the mother of feminist activist and writer Itziar Ziga, did not report her husband's battering and abuses. So here you have some information about the author, Itziar Ziga. I will talk today about La Feliz y Violenta Vida de Maribel Ziga, and she's a writer, a journalist, she's a queer feminist activist, and her most famous works are Devenir Perra, probably, which is about feminism, and she has mostly written books of essays. So in her latest book, La Feliz y Violenta Vida de Maribel Ziga, Itziar Ziga reclaims the lives of working-class women who suffered abuse by their husbands by focusing on her mother, remembering her youth, marriage with a violent man, and separation from him. In the book, the author reveals how during her childhood and youth, her father's violence against her mother marked their lives, but argues that being a victim or survivor of male family violence should not stigmatize women, because the union between mother and daughters and the friendship with other women allow them to enjoy happy moments. Ziga states that men's violence in families is enabled by heteropatriarchy, which has built a world where, through heteronuclear families in alliance with capitalism, women have given in their own interest in favor of those of men. Ziga proposes feminism as the solution to male violence because it offers alternative types of masculinity to men. She develops quite a lot about in this book about her father, but I don't have time today to delve into the portrayal of her father. But it's interesting that she mentions she tries to a little bit to justify her father, or at least she points out positive things about her father as well. So she mentions that basically her father was a victim of the traditional masculine model at that time. So feminism is also the solution to male violence because it offers sorority and understanding to women, placing them in a genealogy of women who have fought against heteropatriarchy throughout history. The book constitutes a homage to the author's mother, but its 4 chapters do not form a traditional biography, since they also include Ziga's own memories and feminist thoughts. So the result is a book not belonging to only one literary genre, which is a common trend in feminist theoretical works. And the book includes several photographs of her mother that I will show in today's presentation in different stages of her life, but it does not contain any photograph of the author with her mother, probably to emphasize her mother's individuality and the relevance of her life. So the opposition between the adjectives happy and violent in the title of the book reveals from the beginning Ziga's rejection of the negative societal view about the woman victim of men's violence. The author states that being a victim or survivor of abuse within the family should not stigmatize women because despite this suffering, they can also enjoy life with the support of women and relatives. I quote, I will read the quotations in Spanish and you have there the translation into English. Me late el deseo revolucionario de aclarar que no solo fuimos mujeres violentadas y que muy a menudo fuimos tremendamente felices. Ziga denounces the lack of empathy and institutional support for battered women, telling that in a municipal office, the woman she was trying to help was told not to show the bruises caused by her husband's beating because it was considered unpleasant. While in another office, her mother was reprimanded because she didn't want to separate from her husband, leaving him without economic means. Thus, Ziga believes that institutions do not do justice to battered women. She says, I quote, el sistema siempre falla protegiéndonos a las mujeres, incluso en el 2020 cuando escribo. Ziga criticizes that society questions battered women or victimizes them as weak or inept, even blaming them for their situation. This makes abused women like her mother hide their difficulties because they do not want others to feel sorry about them. Similarly, people tend to assume that children who have been raised in homes with violence will be aggressive for the rest of their lives. The author complains about this negative view of the survivors of men's family violence. For Ziga, society is an accomplice of the existence and continuity of men's violence, especially during Franco's dictatorship and the 1980s and 90s, the years of her father's abuses. The author locates the root of the situation in heteropatriarchy, which has dominated society during centuries and has affected one way or another all women. I quote, las mujeres hemos crecido durante siglos en un mundo construido contra nosotras. This continuity throughout time happens because, as Alicia Puleo points out following Celia Amorós, patriarchy is a metastable domination system that adapts itself to the different historical contexts to preserve its hegemony. Ziga seems to propose in her book the existence in society of a generalized and ubiquitous violent culture against women that permits men's abuse. Miguel Lorente Acosta offers similar ideas when observing that men's violence in relationships originates in the cultural inequality between men and women. Ziga's opinion, men's violence in romantic relationships has been reinforced through the myth of romantic love and the organization of society in heteronuclear families. The author talks about the romance scam to refer to marriages of women in her mother's generation. I quote, se casaron porque debían y se divorciaron cuando pudieron. Her mother's love for her father made it possible for him to control and isolate her, not allowing her to socialize with her friends, thus breaking the female and feminist alliance. As Mariluz Esteban and Ana Tabora explain, women are socialized to provide affection and leave aside their own interests and needs. Ziga argues that heteronuclear families limit feminist alliances between women and their fight against men's oppression. Already in 1970, Kate Millett offered similar ideas in sexual politics when writing that family is the main institution of patriarchy because it socializes children and youth in sexist ideological attitudes. Although Ziga's arguments about heteronuclear families are relevant to explain the origin and continuation of violence against women, it would also be important for her to mention the changes towards equality in heterosexual relationships in the past decades, even if she does not consider them authentic, as many feminists have pointed out. And also, she could have included the feminist activism of mothers who fight for a better future for their daughters. So these are two possible critiques I have about this book. Ziga also connects heteronuclear families and the traditional division of labor with capitalism, highlighting how this economic system joins forces with patriarchy in women's oppression. Zila Eisenstein uses the term capitalist patriarchy to refer to this mutual dependency that causes the subordination of women by being socially and economically defined according to their biology. Therefore, women have many fewer economic resources than men. Like here you have a quotation of her, I translated, about women being the 50% of the world population, but only owning 10% of the money and 1% of the property. Ziga exemplifies this reality with working class women such as her mother and her female friends in the Renteria neighborhood where she grew up. She mentions that women in her neighborhood lived in buildings full of apartments and families, were suffocated by scarcity and sexism, and some of them even committed suicide by throwing themselves out the windows. This attention to the working class from an intersectional feminist perspective is one of the most interesting and original aspects of the book. Ziga explains that her mother suffered the feminization of poverty as she worked for 17 years as the shop assistant and accountant of her husband's fish shop without contributing to Social Security or earning a salary. Her father was in control of the family's money and each day took the earnings of the fish shop. Her mother had to ask him for money to pay for the household expenses. Men's control of money in relationships creates what can be called economic violence. Besides the dependency of finances, economic violence is based on women's career sabotage and economic exploitation. For instance, having all the household tax fall on women. And the economic aspect plays a key role in the subordination of women who suffer men's violence. In fact, according to Elena Larrauri, economic dependency is the main reason why battered women stay with their husbands. The economic exploitation of Ziga's mother is also evident in her having to be responsible for all the housework, while her husband expected to be served. Feminist scholars such as Zila Eisenstein and Cristina Carrasco Bengoa have pointed out that women's hidden domestic and care work benefits capitalist society by making it possible that workers have energy and ability in their jobs. For this reason, feminist economics asks for a wider definition of the economy that includes the activities that women have performed invisibly at home and moves the focus of analysis from the market to the processes of sustainability of life. In addition to being doubly exploited in the fish shop and at home, Ziga's mother suffered economic violence after separating from her husband, a common reality in battered women who are able to live an abusive relationship. For instance, her father continued to economically abuse her mother. On one hand, the apartment was under the name of him, so she didn't have her name in the apartment. Although when they separated, the apartment was divided equally. The money from the sale of the apartment. But after they separated, her mother invested some money in a business of his father, and that business never worked out. So her mother lost 1,000,000 pesetas. And also after the separation, the father didn't pay for child support. So her mother had to live in a student apartment, then clean houses, and then finally rent an apartment for her and her two daughters until she was awarded social housing. So Ziga criticizes her labor conditions in the underground economy. I quote, pluriempleada, mal pagada y sin contrato. So, similar to the concept of economic violence, the author coins the term heteropatriarchal vampirism to make reference to the financial and personal exploitation of women by their husbands or boyfriends. Ziga asserts the solution to all this, Ziga finds in feminism. Ziga asserts that feminism is necessary so that women who suffer men's violence have support networks that help them break free from their oppression and find happiness. For this reason, she includes at the beginning of each chapter quotations by Spanish and international women authors who have educated her in feminism. For Ziga, feminism makes it possible for her to connect with past women and realize her commonalities with them, what she calls genealogy of women. Becoming a feminist means discovering that you are not alone and that you belong to a lineage of women who throughout history fought for their freedom and rights. If during her childhood and youth, Ziga lacked explanations about her mother's subordination, feminism gave her clarifications and solutions. The author contends that feminism allows women to feel supported and face together heteropatriarchal oppression. I quote, un mundo que sigue siendo tan machista como en el que me crié, pero en el que nosotras ya no estamos aisladas. El feminismo nos rehizo y nosotras nos juntamos. Ziga also insists that feminism is a movement of all women despite their ideological differences, including not only those who follow the normative model, but also those who transgress it. And this is also an important point in today's society when there are all these, controversies about different types of feminism, at least in Spain. Thus, this book encompasses a mosaic of women who have been essential in her life, from her mother and sister to her mother's female friends and her own friends. Ziga recognizes them all in the acknowledgments at the end of the book, highlighting the importance of female friendship. The support and alliance between women are paramount to reach happiness in a society that oppresses them. I quote, las mujeres no podemos transitar sin amigas el patriarcado. So La Feliz y Violenta Vida de Maribel Ziga is a relevant work due to the stigmatizing message about men's violence, intersectional feminism with social class, and the criticism of the coalition between capitalism and patriarchy, and of economic violence. Ziga complains about the little social and institutional understanding of battered women who are blamed for their situation and victimized. She believes that patriarchal society is an accomplice of the abuse of women, sustained by the expectation of romantic love and the organization in heteronuclear families. The author proposes the use of relevant terms to criticize the abuse of women in romantic relationships, such as romance scam, feminization of poverty, and heteropatriarchal vampirism. Although Ziga could have considered the current existence of more egalitarian heteronuclear families, the focus of her mother's life is lost in the last chapter in favor of the author's own experiences, and there is little information about the last period of her mother's life. So these are, possible critiques. But despite these critiques, the book conveys an authentic and honest view of how men's violence harms the lives of mothers and daughters, and how feminism and the support of other women are useful to find an end to that abuse and move towards a happier existence. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Iker, for a fascinating paper foregrounding really crucial issues through that very compelling lens, I thought, of the mother-daughter genealogies and that wider mosaic in a way that puts the book very much in an interesting tension with the works that Àngels was talking about. We won't keep you, Iker, because I know you're running off to your class, but thank you so much for being here today.
And if anybody wants to have any questions, I will be happy to answer them via email.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Take care. And so we'll move on now to our final participant in today's session, to María Xesús Lama, Xesús, who is Associate Professor in Galician and Portuguese Philology at the University of Barcelona, and also a researcher at the ADHUC Centre for Research, Theory, Gender and Sexuality. Her research focuses on contemporary Galician literature, with a particular focus on gender, the literature of the Rexurdimento, and the configuration of a national imaginary. And she was awarded the National Essay Prize in 2018 for her biography of Rosalía de Castro. She's part of the project La Historiografía Literaria en la España de los siglos XIX y XX, castellano, catalán, euskera y gallego, and she's co-director of the journal Abriu Estudios de Textualidad de Brasil, Galicia y Portugal. And her paper today is entitled Rosalía de Castro in Revolutionary Road, Lives That Are Exploding. Thank you so much, Xesús, for being here today, and over to you. Oh, and I think you're still on mute for the moment.
Xesús, no te escuchamos.
Ahora sí.
Now, can you hear?
Perfecto. Thank you, Xesús. Yes, perfectly now, and we can see. Thank you.
Okay, a moment. Yes, can you hear me now?
We can, thank you. Yes, go ahead whenever you're ready.
So, thank you to the organizers for the opportunity to participate in the seminar, and for the indulgence to travel to the past, because I'm going to travel back to the 19th century to introduce an author that is that has some peculiarities. First, she writes her work in two languages, Galician and Spanish. And she holds a canonical position in both of them as a poet. She's also the author of an important body of prose work, and has been largely and finally, silenced or ignored. And finally, in times of the Ángel del Hogar, angel of the home stereotype, she is a pioneer of feminism who explores and denounces in her work the situation of women, giving a voice, especially to working women, and also in times of conservative and Catholic majority of women writers, she politically situates herself in the circles of democratic liberalism. In Galician, she is considered the national poet who plays a central role in the cultural revival of the second half of the century, the 19th century, of course, with the publication of her poetry collection, Cantares Gallegos, and a book that predates by more than 10 years the publication of other Galician works. In fact, it was in the 1980s, when other important publications converged, including her second book, Follas Novas, or New Leaves. And in the prologue, in the preface of this book, she declares that after the success of her previous poetry collection, she felt obliged to continue working for Galician culture. And she says, it wasn't a matter of calling people to war and deserting the flag I had raised myself. I have something in the middle of the... that means that the writer is fully aware of that writing a book in Galician is a politically significant act, and that it is equivalent to raising a flag to lead people into a struggle for a cause that demands sacrifices. Therefore, she is a woman who does not shy away from difficulties, who also plays with her self-representation in a position of leadership as a woman who raises the flag that other fighters will follow in a more or less evident allusion to Delacroix' iconic painting, La liberté guidant le peuple. And let us not forget what this gesture means in a century of revolutions, when they recently before the publication of this book, they experienced the Paris Commune. But at the same time that she raises the flag for the defense of Galicia, its culture and its language, she does not renounce to write in Spanish. In a country where 20% of the literate population learned only in Spanish, it was in that language, in Spanish, that she could aspire to have readers, even to communicate her vindications and her ideals. So in Spanish, she published other books of poems, but especially En las orillas del Sar, that is one of the most important poem books of the 19th century, with the rimas from Becker. but she wrote also 5 novels, and it's one of these novels that I would like to comment today. So I would like to explain also a little the title of my communication, in which I reference the film Revolutionary Road, based on a novel by Richard Yates from 1961. A century, exactly a century later than Rosalia's Castro novel that I want to comment today, this film presents an analysis of a romantic relationship that evolves from love to hatred. But above all, it portrays the progressive annihilation of the female character, April, trapped in a family life that nullifies all her desires for self-development as an autonomous subject, subjecting her to a process of expropriation of her affections, her time, her desires, and her own body through unwanted pregnancies. April rebellion leads to madness in the film, leads to madness and death. And this is also what happens to the female main character of La hija del mar, the first novel by Rosalía de Castro. However, in Flavio, the second novel, the evolution is different. And in both cases, as in Yates' novel, the institution of marriage is bitterly criticized, seen as a paralyzing prison for women. The peculiarity in Flavio is that, like in the movie, there is an attempt to analyze the evolution of an emotional relationship, trying to move beyond a Manichaean position of good and bad, executioners and victims, and focusing on the suffering of both. As DiCaprio and Kate Winslet often said about their characters in the movie, the viewer cannot help but understand both of them. So we can feel we feel pity for them, and we can only think that these two characters have such different personalities and conceptions of life that they could only hurt each other remaining together, and that they better only could follow different paths from the other. So Rosalía herself had married 3 years before the publication of this novel in 1958, a man of complicated character who would also become a leading intellectual in Galicia. The details of the writer's marriage have always been mysterious and widely discussed, partly due to the painful tone of Rosalía's poems in her 2 major works. Oh, I can't move this now. Okay. Yeah. So, as we can see, for example, in this poem, Jack. I'll read only one example. Ya que de la esperanza para la vida mía triste y descolorido ha llegado el ocaso, a mi morada oscura, desmantelada y fría, tornemos paso a paso, porque con su alegría no aumente mi amargura la blanca luz del día. Contenta, el negro nido busca el ave agorera, bien reposa la fiera en el antro escondido, en su sepulcro el muerto, el triste en el olvido y mi alma en su desierto. So it seems that she cries out for retreat and desires the abandonment of her soul in the desert where she inhabits. So, but in 1861, when Flavio was published, she was still very young. They were a couple of 24 and 26. The historical moment before the revolution of 1868 and the proclamation of the First Republic was also a time of ideals and hope, as Catherine Davis demonstrated in her study. And the couple's social circle, which included Democrats, the most radical wing of liberalism, who sought to expand participation through the participation of the people through the universal suffrage and bring about significant political change in pursuit of more social justice. However, in the novel, what is represented is a terrible struggle between genders, generating wounds and resentments that lead to the impossibility of love. It is a heartbreaking, intimate experience that shapes the personalities and values of the individuals, with the resulting consequences for society. To what extent the penetrating psychological understanding of the characters arises from the author's personal experience in the early years of her marriage, or from the observation of other relationships in the surroundings, will always remain a mystery that is impossible to determine. However, the passionate tone with which the turbulences of the relationship and the reactions of fear and indignation of the female protagonist, main character, are portrayed leads me to believe that there is something personal, something of the personal experience in the deep understanding of the power dynamics that strain the relationship. The main character of the novel is Flavio, a sort of noble savage who leaves the isolation of his family home to enter the world in the town of Santiago de Compostela. But in her way to the town, he encounters a country festival and comes into contact for the first time with women whom, like an ignorant Percival who lives in the woods, he views as marvelous beings endowed with a magical aura comparable to angels. But like Percival, our character recalls the wise words of a master who had warned him of the dangers of the world, especially of women. Las mujeres, de quien mi maestro me habló vagamente como de una cosa mezquina y débil, mezquina, repetía, mi maestro estaba loco. Oh, no, jamás. Yo creo que no hay nada más sublime que la mujer, nada más bello, más digno de nuestros pensamientos. But faced with the innocence of some groups of girls heading to the festival, faced with his innocence, some groups of girls leading to the festival look at him mockingly and begin a game of tensions and provocations in which the social relationship between sexes, the men and women, is presented as a vicious circle in which everyone participates and causing the innocent boy a wound that seems to radically condition him in the future. Sobre el eco aún no extinguido de aquella risa, se dejó oír la voz metálica y casi desagradable, aunque juvenil, que dijo con acento más irónico del mundo: este manso cordero no espera sino a que le conduzcan al sacrificio. El semblante de Flavio se cubrió de una palidez mortal al escuchar aquellas palabras. The negative view that society conveys about women in the process of shaping masculinity is further reinforced by his peers and appears in the novel through a group of young men who welcome him, and among them one offers to guide him in the new life. This friend instructs him in the norms of behavior for a normative masculinity that must be dominant. Burlaos de ellas como ellas se han burlado de vos, demostradles de lo que es capaz una voluntad virgen en medio de la sociedad, etc. Having established the terms of the interaction in this context, it seems that love can only be a constant power struggle. This is the young man who meets Mara, 16 years old, who has already suffered the first disappointments in love and appears as a rational skeptic and quite vindicative young woman. For example, when she said, decid que queréis vernos esclavas y no compañeras vuestras, decid que de un ser que siente y piensa como vosotros queréis hacer unos juguetes vanos, unas máquinas ya risueñas, ya plañideras y llorosas, que a medida de vuestro deseo estén alegres y canten al ruido de sus cadenas o lloren y giman en vano al compás de vuestros cantos de olvido. The constant demand of obedience and submission generates in the young girl a fear that soon surpasses tenderness and patience. Therefore, sensing a grim future in marriage, it is she who flees from the commitment. Mara, espantada ante su espantoso porvenir, temblaba a que llegase la hora de unir su suerte a la del viajero y por lo mismo hallaba siempre ingeniosos medios para dilatar el casamiento con que Flavio soñaba eternamente. The young Mara rejects marriage and has to pay a high price for her pride and intelligence. So as boys also, tired of the constant struggle, become cynical and perpetuate their emotional armor. Also, women pay their price, that is loneliness, the price for their freedom. But not only the pride women pay their price, also those who give themselves up without calculation, seduced and abandoned, are not free or spared from this fate. This is a cross-cutting reality that affects all social classes in a country experiencing massive migration in that time. In her poems, Rosalía de Castro constructs a peculiar female community, the widows of living and widows of dead, las viudas de los vivos y viudas de los muertos, who must often face the struggle for survival alone, especially the women from the village, from the rural media, who, when their men immigrate, must bear the responsibility of their children. They are alone, and also they have to work to take care of their children. The writer's sensitivity is to this reality cannot be separated from the fact that she herself had to live alone with her children and with scarce resources, isolated from the world in a little town where she had difficulties accessing to the press, to books, while her husband settled alone in Madrid for work reasons. Therefore, her critique of the institution of marriage is always clear, though she never loses her sense of humor. And I finally want to read a part of one of their poems in Galician. Do dereito, do revés, matrimonio, un dogal es. Eres tentación do inferno, mas casarei, pois no inverno non ter quen lle un quente os pés. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Xesús. Really interesting, I thought, across those last two papers was the idea of this relational identity of women emerging both as a source of threat and one as a source of power. So we'll look forward to discussing that. But I think now, with thanks to all three of our speakers, we can open up to the floor, for which I'll hand over to Raquel.
Yes, has anybody any questions, or if there aren't any questions, I might jump in. Shall I do that? Okay, and do that, and hopefully afterwards, some of people in the audience will have some questions. Well, many questions, in fact. I'm going I'm starting with Àngels. Well, I thank you for bringing in the diary. I myself fascinated by diaries, and I feel that we'll give Richard the opportunity to speak afterwards. I just very quickly ask my question to both Àngels and Iker. I don't know why my my bell is ringing. Well, thank you for bringing the diary, and thank you for because I feel that we are coming to a good place to understanding diaries, because I think traditionally we have considered them just as a very interesting way of documenting an author's lives. But I think that I was very shocked by El Viaje and how Guimarães pronounced this affirmation: "I am a woman without a generational group." How diaries specifically, contrary to memories, contrary to autobiography, where in some ways they present a subject that is I was thinking, for example, about Carlos Barral Memories, and how he presents himself in relationship with the Barcelona group, the group of Barcelona in the 50s, and I find very interesting this this aspect of the diaries you have presented on that focus on isolation, but also in confrontation, in confronting one's loneliness, in confronting one's exclusion. Well, that's one question for Àngels. And the question for Chus is like, I found it very, very interesting. It's always good to read, to listen to Rosalía de Castro's words and Rosalía de Castro's complex work in relationship to the self, to her authorial self. And my question, as you being the biographer, being Rosalía de Castro's biography, is how do we interpret her works, as you have done? We interpret their works considering them as fictional works, but at the same time acknowledging that there's something about Rosalía de Castro's inquietudes, about Rosalía de Castro's presentation to the world in these fictional works that are poetry and her poetry and her novels. So we can pass it over to Àngels if she wants to start.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. I will try to answer and to answer it. Let's see. All of the four Catalan women writers I have spoken about share a sense of isolation and of solitude because of different reasons in every case. No, in first place we have the solitude and the isolation feeling due to Francoist context because of the dictatorship, which prevents them from expressing freely in Catalan or just expressing freely, you know. And then it is also because of the heteropatriarchal society, which in Francoist context is very, very, very powerful, very, very hard, especially to those women who try to express themselves in a language and with ideas different to those which were dominant. No? And it is also because of there are difficulties to fit in the Catalan literary sphere, in the Catalan literary generation, which were dominated or described by male critics, which never thought, though their works, their autobiographical works, were proper or were worth value. And that's why they, each of them, from their own perspective, because, for example, the Waiting Diary of Carmen Riera, which is about pregnancy, does not share the same interest or protest that the previous ones. But anyway, she also feels isolated and alone in thinking about pregnancy from the body, from the inside, and establishing a dialogue with the inner child, with the other within. And this is a special relationship that the critics do not consider interesting, because of the survey we conducted in the University of Alicante. We have a kind of canon, no, of the best diaries ever known, and these women are not there. Just one is there. In the first place is the one who speaks about love and who presents herself as humble and as an aspiring writer, waiting for a male mentor to approve her writings. That is not true, because she has a dual voice which emerges in a surprising way in her more private writings, the letters especially. and we can learn from that is a kind of mask she uses to veil her ambition behind a kind of model, a feminine model, which she thinks may be more accepted, And I don't know if I have answered to your question, but the thing about isolation, solitude, and loneliness is very, very important in this diarist, in this Catalan diarist.
Yeah, no, thank you. Very, very important and very powerful, I think, to construct a form of life writing that resists the inherited ideas. Choose if you want to answer my question, and then I give the word to.
Yes. Yes, if I understood well. So you ask about the importance of how to interpret the biographical dimension of the fictional works. Yeah. Well, Rosalía de Castro is a writer who left very little documents, personal documents behind. She demanded her family to burn out all her papers, and her husband, who kept I suppose a lot of letters, burned them himself some decades later. So we have this problem to know the person is quite difficult, and also because her wife, her husband survived her for long years, and he was the editor of her work. He wrote the introductions. He wrote about her character. He didn't allow to publish her pictures to the press, at least during the first years when she died, after to the obituaries, and so on and so on. So we have to read the fictional works and to knowing, of course, that is fiction. We have to imagine what interest she had, what questions she was interested in write about, or to think about. And that is a very dangerous practice. That was the way, a way of manipulation of her image along the time. So the first one was her husband. Although I think he was very intelligent, and she did something very good, that due to the evolution of times, turn into a conservative society, more and more conservative, he constructed a quite conservative image of her, quite religious, or mother of family, that wasn't interested in fame or public life, and so on and so on. And that was false, but was important to get her accepted in time. So I think she is now a canonical author, in part because of this manipulation. But now we have, I think, we have many lectures of these works, and that helps to evaluate the possibilities of the biographical dimension, I think. But it's necessary to turn to her works. It's the only way.
Thank you too. So I see that there's another question from Sean. I'm going to pass it over to Richard and then to Sean.
Hi, Àngels, Mercedes. My question's for you. Everybody within Catalan literature and Catalan culture more widely is always demonized as upper class, la burguesia catalana de sempre, which is always a bit confusing. But I'm wondering, could you maybe comment on social or social status and class with regards to these women, and whether that's something that complicates your research, or is it something that I'm just thinking particularly about the recent publication by the Ajuntament de Barcelona about Dolors Aleu, the first doctor, the Catalan doctor, and within the Spanish state. And certainly, the comments were, claro que era metgessa porque era catalana, this idea that the high birth, in a sense, it took away the fact that she was the doctor, it was quite, la típica española, so I'd really appreciate your input on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Well, I don't know how to properly answer to it, but I think that all of these women had or have a private chamber, like Virginia Woolf said, it should be necessary just to write novels, to write poems, and also to write about your life, no, about their lives. And then they have a social, they belong to a class, to a social class, which allows them to write and to express themselves, and to combine that with a profession that, for example, in case of María Aurelia Capmany, was journalism, but also she was an actress in theater, and she even get to be a political very actively. She was I don't know what's the word in English, but she was a part of the mayor of Barcelona, and if, in more significantly when she was in an age when women begin to disappear of the public sphere, and then she did exactly the contrary, no? And then they all have a powerful status in each of them in their way. For example, Carmen Riera is an academic. She works in, and she is a member of the RAE, and she's an important lecturer in Barcelona too. I mean, I don't know if that is bad for them, or for the critics to consider them. I haven't read about that. I have read other I don't know how to explain it. Other reasons for not to consider them good writers. For example, that the pregnancy theme or subject is not interesting for a lot of critics, as narrated from the inside. Not in a fiction where you can think about it, or you are they tell you a story. No, it is just a long monologue, or maybe a dialogue with an unborn child that is not one priority for the universal themes that are considered value to be in a canon, you know, but not their social extraction or their social level. Anyway, they can write because they belong to a certain, they have a profession or belong to a certain class that allows them to dedicate a good part of their lives to writing. I don't know if I have answered your question. Thank you very much.
So I'll pass it over to Sean to one last question of the session. Go ahead, Sean.
Sorry. Yeah, again, thank you very much to you and Hani, and to wonderful papers by Xesús and Àngels Iker in absentia. My intervention would be just a commentary to the whole room in a way, even though it picks up from the María Àngels' paper, when she highlighted this notion of stridence in relation to women's voices, that I thought it was very interesting, because stridence is not only something forceful, as she was saying, and feminist, linked to feminism, but also disagreeable and in a way loud. And it made me think of last week, when we were sort of going through that quote by Javier Marías of women always complaining, and I was wondering how the voices, women's voices, are perceived within these texts and also outside. And also it made me think of a wonderful essay that probably most of you know of, by Anne Carson, called Women's Voice, where she examines how women voices are reported in the classics. And it seems that women never speak. They always either yell or howl or cry or scream, wail, squeal. But is this sort of the quality of the voice that is damning? And I was sort of, because we've had so many wonderful accounts of these voices, how these voices report on other voices by women, and also how they are received. I mean, in terms of the Catalans, very often, as she was saying, very powerful, very strident. But strident is a double-edged word that I think is very interesting, because all of them have been very strident, but also the danger of being strident somehow to the reader's ears. I don't know if anyone has thought about that or has any comments, but as I said, thank you very much for a set of very inspiring papers, and overall a wonderful conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have, apart from Sean's reflection, which I find completely pertinent, in not only with regards to this session, but also through the whole series, the problem of the voice, of not finding a neutral voice, which we could be talking and talking for ages about this. But well, I'm going to give the opportunity to Noelia to ask her question.
Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry, I still cannot find this icon that says raise your hand. I'm sorry. Well, thank you so much for such stimulating papers. I've written so many notes, but it's not really a question. It's more of a comment for María Àngels, because I found really interesting this concept of being the subject of your own observation. I think it was Carmen Riera. Carmen Riera mentioned that, right? And this obviously, challenges the established gaze of the other as universal, etc., etc. But I'm just wondering, to what extent is this own gaze, this being the subject of my own observation, is transversed or altered or influenced, by this very gaze of the other? I don't know. It's just something that came.
That's an interesting question. Thank you, Noelia, which I think I can't answer. But anyway, Carmen Riera questions herself because she is complaining about the lack of waiting diaries or diaries about pregnancy. She has not had models to write her own work. And then she thinks it is because women have been denied the authority to write or to speak about their bodies in such a way, in such a sincere and quite unknown way, And then she thinks that from now on, it will be different because women are no longer only objects of a speech, of the other's speech, but also subjects of that speech. And then she is happy to be at the same time the subject and the object of her speech, of her work. And I don't know, maybe she is very influenced about what is to be a mother or to be a woman who is pregnant. But anyway, she's just trying to define herself in a different way. I don't know if she gets to do that, but anyway, she's trying. She does a great effort to do that, to undefine herself as a pregnant woman from that she has read read in fiction works about pregnancy, women who are going to have a child and so on. I think she tries to do it. Maybe she doesn't get to, but anyway, I think that's an important gaze, which has not been very common or very usual in before she tries to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Àngels. We've got the last question for Choose from Catherine Davis in the chat. She asked, when Rosalía was living in Galicia with her children alone, did she have any close women friends? Maria Bertorini is the only one I know of. Choose, have you got any?
Yes. Oh, thank you, Catherine. It's wonderful to have you here. I don't remember now the name, but Encarna Fernandez, but can be the woman. A woman from Padrón, but that's in the last years in Padrón, when she was living next to her relatives. I think there was maybe others, but this woman who was cuñada, I don't know that word, the wife of José María Posada, I think. I think she was very close to her. I will look for the name because I don't remember now very well the all the persons who were around her in Padrón, but I think there was a pair of families who were quite close to her in that last days. In Santiago, before he went to Padrón, I think she has also a pair of families, but she was closer maybe to or they were more known the men of the families who were friends because they were also active in the cultural life of the town, but they were family friends. I think she had some relations. I can look for the concrete names and write to you, Catherine.
It's just that she always comes across as incredibly lonely, and you think she must have had some friends there, and it would be nice to know who. But I know you're having a conference on her life in the end of April, so perhaps there was some more information there. Anyway, good luck with the following volumes in your biography.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all our speakers, and thank you very much to the public, to the colleagues that have participated in other sessions. And we will see each other next Thursday for our last session. So I encourage everybody to sign up. If any of you have any problems with the registration, do let us know, and we can handle it. Thank you very much. See you next Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.